What's up, peoples, and welcome back to another video and my first episode of this series for Preptober and NaNoWriMo 2023. Today I'm going to be walking you through my process for mapping out the characters that I'm going to be featuring in my NaNoWriMo novel codenamed Project Eros. Now, before we get started, a little bit about this story. So this is my first ever NaNoWriMo. I'm very excited to be participating this year. And I decided to further challenge myself by writing a romance novel because it's something that I'm not experienced in, but I would like to learn. So I'm going to be trying to push myself out of my comfort zone. The reason that I decided to codename it Project Eros is that I had a phase where I was really into Greek myths, and the story of Eros, who is the son of Aphrodite, the goddess of love, so he's the god of love, and the human mortal Psyche, I think I'm pronouncing her name right, and their sort of like tragic-ish love story was one of my favorite myths from that time, and I've read multiple retellings of it at this point, and it just seemed like a fitting name for my little queer romance novel. So since I'm doing a romance to push myself out of my comfort zone, I decided to push myself out of my comfort zone even further and do contemporary, which usually I'm a strict fantasy or sci-fi girl. I just write in those two. This is actually my first attempt ever at contemporary, so I'm a little nervous, but I'm also excited because doing something this out of my comfort zone seems like a big challenge, but also very exciting. It's great practice. Even if I never write contemporary romance again, now I will have mastered, or attempted to master, depending on how this goes, the writing of romance so I can include it in other stories. First thing that I wanted to walk you through, this is going to walk you through a couple different things. I'm going to talk about theme. So the first thing that I did when I decided on my story, start breaking it down into little details. I'm very much a pantser, so all of this is going to be pantser friendly. It's going to be like a plantser, or is it a plotser? Whichever one. It's going to be like a plotter and a pantser came together, and that is what this method is. So my theme is coming of age. I feel like that's broad enough that I can just sort of see where the story takes me. A lot of times I don't pick a theme, I find my theme. Like with Project Punk, the comic book I'm working on, which I will also link that playlist in the cards above. The theme is family, and specifically found family. And that wasn't intentional, it just sort of happened while I was writing. So I like just sort of discovery writing, personally. But going into NaNoWriMo, I really do need an outline and to know more about my story in general. So I'm trying to flesh things out a bit, because when I tried my write a novel in 60 days challenge, looking back on it, I didn't do any planning. I thought that I could just sit down and write, and that would probably have worked if I was going to take years to write it like I am with Project Punk, but I was giving myself a time limit. So I need to plan if I want to have a time limit. So once you have your basic concept and your theme, we can move on to the characters. Now I'm going to do a breakdown of main character template and side character template because I have some questions that I asked myself for each of them. Now I used Notion for my planning because I recently became obsessed with Notion. I just wanted to break down what I figured out and decide about all of the characters before moving in. It's sort of like a template that you could copy. I'm just going to use my primary main character, but since I have two main characters and then a sort of like sub-main character who's going to have a subplot of her own within the story. So for those three characters, I did this more complex template with more questions. Obviously, all of these are optional, and this first one is extra optional. It's the color palette. Now, I had heard someone talking about this, and I thought it was a really neat idea, so I decided to give both of my main characters their own color palette, which I will feature to sort of like give you a distinct feeling of them. Just sort of like add like a layer of artsiness to the story. I'm hoping to be able to implement this, so I picked one, but I've never tried to do it before, so we'll see if it sticks when I'm actually writing. But I gave them each a color, ties into their personality or their story arc through color psychology. You don't have to, of course, though, but the questions that I asked myself, I split into two sections. One is more like practical, and then the other is more like personality. So for all of my protagonists, I asked myself the following questions. And you can write these down, but I will also probably display them on the screen somewhere, so you could just take a screenshot. Name, which this is first name, middle name if you want, and last name, as well as any nicknames. Then I wrote down their role in the story. So, for example, this character is the protagonist and narrator. Their gender and pronouns, their sexuality, their age, and then their physical description. So this is just their, physical form, not how they dress. I have a separate section for that right after. But this is just sort of like their height, their hair, their eyes, their facial features, etc. Then right after that is aesthetic description. So I put like whether they dye their hair, if they wear makeup or paint their nails, how they like to dress. You can put specific outfits there. You could just give a basic vibe. And then in the next section, I gave them their personality questions. So I asked their greatest strength, then I asked their greatest weakness. Now you can put multiple things in here, and I did, but there should be at least one. Then I put the lesson. So this is the thing that they have to learn over the course of the story. And I only gave this to the main characters because, I don't have time to give them all a story arc. Some of them are just popping in to do certain things for other character story arcs. But I still wanted to make sure that I had a goal for each protagonist, something that they have to overcome or learn. And then last, I just put personality traits. This was a catch-all for everything that didn't fit into greatest strength or greatest weakness. It's just all the other stuff. That was everything that I had for my main characters. And then all my side characters, I just asked their name, their role in the story, their gender and pronouns, their sexuality, their age, their physical description, their aesthetic description, and then I skipped greatest strength, greatest weakness, and lesson, and I just put personality traits. So it's the same pretty much, except I removed a lot of the story arcness and just have personality traits. I also split my characters into two groups, one for each of the protagonists. So you have all the ones that fall into the orange color palette and all the ones that fall into the blue color palette. Now you don't need to answer all of those questions. You can throw in more questions, less questions. I've seen templates that are many pages long, but whenever I try and do that, I just start to feel overwhelmed. So I want to make something small and pantser friendly. And I just recorded all the information that I felt like I needed to have. Then when it comes to world building, I just picked a couple locations that I knew my story would be set in. Since I'm writing contemporary, I don't need to do a bunch of like major science fiction or fantasy world building. I do need to make a world that feels like it could exist, which honestly is scarier to me. I've tried to write things set on Earth before, even just like in the future, and it makes me feel really nervous because I don't feel like I'm getting the facts right, and it feels like I have to do more research. Whereas when I'm writing fantasy, I can just make it all up, and that feels much more comfortable to me. So I'm actually really daunted by doing contemporary, so I just picked 5 locations. That's pretty much going to be all that I feature, just to make it feel a little bit more manageable to me. The 3 main characters' houses, the high school, and a pizza place. That's my locations. And I found images on the internet that I felt like suited these locations. I do not own these images. I just looked up suburban house art or pizzeria art, so I'm just using them for personal use. They will not be like on covers or anything or in the book. I'm just using them as references for what I think the place would look like. And I gave them names. So I named the pizza place and I named the high school. So hopefully this helps you if you are also on the stage where you're making your characters and doing the world building and the theme and all of that for your NaNoWriMo novel. Have a wonderful Preptober, and do make sure to subscribe because next weekend or the weekend after that, I will be having a video coming out talking all about plotting. I have actually like a whole little map set up. I'm going to do lots of little plans. I'm going to show you how to fit a subplot into it, at least how I do it. This isn't the only way to do things, and I'm just showing you my experience. I am not a published author yet. I'm just bringing you along and showing you the realistic journey that I'm following, so hopefully you can relate to it and learn a bit from my mistakes and the things that I do right. I would love to hear a bit about what you're going to be writing for NaNoWriMo if you're participating this year, and happy writing!